Episode 9, Life of a Saint. We are going back, like way back, like 1967 back. He is the father of former NFL quarterback Craig Kupp. He is the grandfather of current NFL linebacker Kettner Kupp, as well as the grandfather of current wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He's a Saints Hall of Famer. He is the originator of the whole family tree in the NFL, Jake Kupp.
What's up, guys? This is Mike Carney.
This is Toy Cook.
I'm Randy Mueller.
This is Quinn Early.
I'm Delvin Bro.
I'm Alex Molden.
I'm Jake Kupp, and this is Life of a Saint.
And this is Life of a Saint.
And this is Life of a Saint.
The Life of a Saint. Life of a Saint.
Life of a Saint.
And this is Life of a Saint. Whodat?
All right, Jake, great to speak with you. My first question, I guess, I saw you were born in Pasadena. You moved up north to Washington at a younger age. Can you tell me what that early journey was like for you?
Well, we lived in California for 5 years.
Okay.
And then we moved, my dad was from the state of Nebraska, and we moved to Nebraska and lived there until I was in the 4th grade. And then in the 4th grade, we moved to the state of Washington. And that's how I kind of got my connection with the University of Washington there.
So why did you end up moving to Washington?
Well, it was kind of my grandparents. My granddad was an immigrant from Switzerland, and he got to the point where he was running a large co-op in Omaha, Nebraska. And when he retired, he had his wife's brother lived in Sunnyside, Washington, and he had always enjoyed farming. And so he bought a vineyard and came out, and our family followed him, and that's history.
Like many other NFL players, you were a 3-sport athlete in high school. Was football always the number one on the priority depth chart for you?
Well, when I was in junior high school, I was more of a baseball player. I was a pitcher. And when I got into high school, I made the varsity as a pitcher. And I actually really didn't make the football team, the varsity, until I was a senior. And so football was kind of a delayed thing. I always dreamed about becoming a professional baseball player. And somehow football got in the way, and thankfully it was a great career. Also loved basketball. Our basketball team my senior year went to state. We were probably the small school in the state tournament, and we took 3rd place and have some fantastic memories from that run.
You end up going to University of Washington. Was that just because it was the local school and you had your eye on it growing up, or was there another reason for that?
Well, they kind of chose me. Our Jim Owens was our coach at the University of Washington, and just by chance, he came over and spoke at our football banquet my senior year, and I don't know how that happened, because Sunnyside had a population of around 5,000 people, and it was kind of unique that first of all that he came to Sunnyside. And somehow, just on the spot, he gave me or offered me a scholarship. We didn't go through, what they go through today with the commitments and what have you. So it was kind of interesting. So I ended up, that was my only offer that I had, and so that's where I ended up.
A lot of players, they're either like the physically gifted guy or the super technical guy. Did you lean one way or the other when you played, or were you kind of a healthy balance, I guess, in between the two?
I would probably say maybe a combination. Okay. I think because I've been a 3-sport athlete, I think a combination of learning the skills, like for instance in basketball. I think basketball gives you a sense of balance and really enhances a lot of your athletic skills. as is baseball. Baseball, there was a lot of coordination and what have you that it took, to be a pitcher. And then, but where I was so fortunate is that when I attended the University of Washington, they really stressed technique. And we spent a lot of time. In fact, when I was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, they said that most players coming out of the University of Washington had kind of about a 2-year head start on other players just because of the focus on developing technique. So I really felt, just honored that I had that opportunity to attend the University of Washington, plus, having some skill. But as far as having, size, speed, when I was a high school senior, I weighed 184. And when I graduated, my last year of football at the University of Washington, I weighed 203 pounds. So I wouldn't exactly say I have size or necessarily strength. In fact, back in those old days, we didn't even have a weight room at the University of Washington. And until after my senior football season, they finally built a weight room, and fortunately I had an opportunity to work out with some pro football players that had come back to school after they had graduated, and so I got a chance to work out with them and kind of prepare myself for my first year in the NFL.
So as you're climbing the ranks through school and everything on your way to the NFL, who was the biggest influence in you ultimately making that leap into professional football?
Well, I'd have to say without a doubt it was Gil Brandt. Gil was the personnel director with the Dallas Cowboys, and I didn't even think I had a chance. At 203 pounds, being an offensive lineman, you don't think a lot about going into football. I was playing baseball at the University of Washington too, and I kind of felt like my best chances were to be a pitcher in the major leagues, and so that's kind of where my focus was. But for some reason, I'll never understand this. Gil Brandt, and you're familiar with who Gil Brandt is.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, he drafted me at 203 pounds as an offensive lineman to come to the Dallas Cowboys. And in fact, there's kind of a story behind it. I didn't even know the day of the draft. And I was out, I can remember, at school at some place, and I got a call from my wife, and she heard on the radio that I was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. And she said, "Do you want to play?" And I said, "Do I want to play? I'm ready to sign right now." And so that's how it happened, without me really thinking a lot about it, and having my goals and dreams set on playing football. It just kind of came together that way.
So I was going to ask you if you expected to get drafted, but since you didn't even know when the draft was, I'm going to assume that the answer is no.
Yes, no, there is no way that I expected to be drafted. Like I said, I didn't even know what day the draft was about.
Were there any obstacles along the way that were particularly tough for you?
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of things. One was my preparation, getting ready to go into the NFL. As I said, once I found out that I was drafted, that became my focus. And so I went from 203 pounds to 229 pounds. And that doesn't sound like a lot of weight to gain, but for me, I had a real high metabolism rate. And, I could just burn food just by looking at it. And so I really had to dedicate myself to working out and really, pushing myself to work as hard as I could. I can remember our weight room was down in a basement below the coach's offices. And when I got through lifting weight, I would have to hang on to the rail to get myself up to the stairs, just because I'd exhausted my legs, I exhausted everything that I had. I gave everything that I had, to to get the strength and the weight to play in the NFL. And the second thing was preparing my mind because, as you probably know, having self-control or control over your mind is probably the most important thing that you can have, because as a rookie, when you go into camp, all of a sudden you're surrounded by these athletes that are just fantastic athletes, better than anything that you've ever seen before. Like the first guy that I started going up against in Dallas was Bob Lilly, all-pro lineman. And I mean, I could have looked at him, and if I'd have compared myself to him, I would have said, hey, there's no way that I can make it. But, because I had spent a lot of time visualizing myself playing pro football, I dreamed about it. And so my mind, when I report to the Dallas Cowboys, in my mind, I already was a Dallas Cowboy. I wasn't having to make the team. I had arrived as a veteran. And you have to have that, because the first time I went up against Bob Lilly, I came up, and this was a one-on-one pass protection drill. I came up out of my stance, and there wasn't anybody in front of me. And he was so quick that he got around me before I could even see him. And you would say to yourself, well, oh my gosh, I can't play this game. But, to me, it's okay. I've got to be able to get up out of my stance. I've got to be able to do these things in order to be able to compete at this level. And so I would say that two things that I had to do, was preparing myself physically, but even more so was preparing myself mentally.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of fun, because I can remember when I was lifting weights down in that weight room. You lift, and you spot, and then you rest while the third person. And so while I was resting, I just kind of closed my eyes, lean up against the wall, and I just started to visualize myself in my Dallas Cowboy uniform, going up against, say, Green Bay or somebody like that, and just pictured myself being successful, and that's really what kind of prepared me for football.
So Dallas gives you your first shot in the NFL. I'm sure it holds a near and dear place in your heart. Was it tough getting traded from Dallas to Washington early on in your career?
Oh, Tom, I can't tell you how tough that was, because you could see, even though at that point, Dallas wasn't America's team, but you could see that it was in the making. Mm-hmm. And I loved Tom Landry. He's just a fantastic coach. The talent there was just out of this world. And so when I got traded to Washington, it was really, really hard. And I could understand why they did it. At that time, I weighed about 229, 230, and they really utilized a running attack. I think my forte was my pass blocking, but my weakness probably was, my one-on-one blocking for the running game. And so I was traded to Washington, and they took a look at my size and they made me a tight end.
So when you get to Washington, it's a little bit of a different experience, apparently. They try to tap into some of your roots of playing tight end earlier on in your playing days. I'm guessing that experiment didn't really go too well, or?
Well, they had a guy named Jerry Smith, who was an all-pro tight end, and I was playing behind him, so my opportunities weren't too good. Where they utilized me mostly was on short yardage and goal line, and so I did just catch 4 passes during my time there, but they just didn't, again, because of my size, see me as being an offensive lineman. At that time, offensive linemen were probably, not anywhere near as large as they are today, but they at least were, like 255, 260, in that range someplace. And
Gotcha.
I just didn't quite have that size. Nor did I have the speed as a tight end. In fact, there was a kind of a story. Sam Huff was our middle linebacker, And in practice, every time I'd take off downfield on a pass route as a tight end, he'd start yelling, "Lyman downfield, Lyman downfield."
All right, so 1967 comes around, and it's not like today where if they added an expansion franchise, they could be playoff bound early. I mean, we saw it with Jacksonville and Carolina teams like that. What was it like for you heading over to New Orleans, brand new franchise? They're just kind of like piecing something together in order to put a team on the field. What was it? What was your headspace like?
Well, we had, and I can't remember. His first name was Cotton, and his last name was Cotton. But there was a gentleman that was working with the New Orleans Saints that had been with the Dallas Cowboys, and I think he was the one that recommended that the Saints draft me in the expansion draft. And so they immediately told me they were moving me back to guard, which, you know, was good news for me. And I was starting to gain a little weight. I was probably up to about 235, 240. And so, and I knew I was a good pass blocker. And so I knew that I could develop my, you know, my running pass, running blocking. So I was really encouraged. But again, you had to control your mind. You know, you couldn't allow yourself to think, oh, what if, you know, I don't make it here. I just knew. I never worried about not making the team. I knew that I was going to play. But it was challenging in New Orleans because they'd bring players in by the busload, you know, that were released from other teams, and as they were trying to build this new team. And it was kind of fun for me because during the exhibition season, I was rooming with Jimmy Taylor, and and Paul Horning, you know, he didn't pass his physical, but he was a part of the team. Billy Kilmer, Doug Atkins. I mean, it was just a great place to be, being around, you know, a lot of talent, and so I really enjoyed my stay there. I had a little bit of a problem with our offensive line coach. He and I, Walt Yaworski, didn't quite see eye to eye, and so I ended up getting traded to Atlanta halfway through the season.
So in doing some of the research for this interview, one thing I noticed, which is super bizarre, so you have a contract in New Orleans. It's a 2-year contract, and the Saints traded just the first year of the balance of that first year of that contract to Atlanta, and you play in Atlanta the balance of the year, come back to New Orleans in '68. Is that right?
John, you did your homework. Yeah. I had a 67 and 68 contract with New Orleans, and what they did is they just traded my 1967 contract, which you can't do in the league anymore.
Right.
But it was a weird deal, and so I went to Atlanta, and I got there on a Sunday, so I missed, I think it was the 8th game of the season, and then I started for them the next week. And it was kind of hard because their numbering system was opposite of what New Orleans was. And so in my mind, I'd have to take the play that was called in the huddle and revert it to the numbering system in New Orleans. But it was really a positive experience for me for 2 reasons. One is I had a lot of success. I think in the remaining games that I had the highest score of any of the offensive linemen. So I had a lot of success. And the second thing was that I met Brad Eklund, our offensive coach at Atlanta, and he just, I can't tell you, John, he just turned my life around because he treated me with respect. He valued me, and it was just, I just can't tell you what he means to me. He's not alive today, but I just can't tell you what Brad meant to me. It's kind of interesting. Here in Yakima, his nephew is a dermatologist here,
And that coach went from Atlanta with you to New Orleans, correct?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
here's what happened. At the end of the season, because New Orleans had my 68 contract, I had to go back to New Orleans. But I couldn't see going back to the situation that I had with the offensive coach that I'd had there. I just felt like, I'm going to end up right back where I was. And so I just wrote the Saints and said, I'm not coming. And so, and Atlanta tried to trade for me, but New Orleans wanted the number 1 draft choice. Now, this is the story that I was told, so I don't know how there is in it. But Atlanta told me they wanted number 1, and they couldn't give up a number 1 for me. And so I wrote the NFL and said, hey, this rule is a crazy rule, and I'm not going back to New Orleans. I'll sit out and wait. And then New Orleans hired Brad Eklund. And the minute they hired Brad Eklund, I said, hey, I'm a New Orleans Saint. And so I ended up going back to New Orleans, which, I can't tell you what that meant to me. And the rest of my career, it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Getting back to that contract that we were talking about earlier, was it tough gelling with your teammates over in Atlanta with them knowing, hey, look, we're going to have this guy for 8 games or so, and then he's heading back over to New Orleans? Was that tough?
I didn't even think about that because, to be honest with you, and this doesn't say a lot to my intelligence, but I didn't really think a lot about the fact that New Orleans had traded my 1967 contract. I just thought, hey, this is my new team, and I gelled very quickly. I had 2 teammates from college, Junior Coffey and Jim Norton, that played for Atlanta, and then I made friends with the offensive line. Errol Linden was our offensive tackle, and he ended up in New Orleans with me, and so it was a very quick transition there, and I didn't have time to think about it. Like I said, I got there on a Sunday, and the next Sunday I was starting for them. So I really had a lot of work, just kind of, learning the offense and getting things down. So it was, and we played against New Orleans later that year, and I hate to say this, but I think it was the only game that they won. But I had a super game against Dave Rowe, as I remember, and so that helped me a little bit as far as.
All right, Jake, I'm going to bust your chops a little bit. So, according to my research, you were 0-4 1967, as in you played in New Orleans in the front half of the season. They didn't win any of those games. You get to Atlanta, and they didn't win anything once you got there. Was that a tough intro into the what we now call the NFC South?
I wasn't going to say that, John.
I'm sorry.
You're almost too well.
That's pretty funny.
Looking back through the first, decade or two of New Orleans Saints football, there wasn't a whole lot of winning. So the personal accolades must have been pretty special. What was it like for you making a Pro Bowl?
Well, it was pretty darn exciting. Like you said, we've been through some pretty difficult times, and I include myself in that 1967 season because I was there for half the season, and then 68 and 69, they were tough years. But the thing that I remember most about New Orleans is the fans. If you'll look back, you'll see at every game that those first couple of seasons, we had from 79,000 to 81,000 fans that showed up every week. And it was a show. Our halftime shows and everything, it was, and the fans were so excited and everything. They kind of made it easier for us. It was hard. I remember there was a newspaper article that somebody wrote, I can't remember, and I said that, every time you lose a game, it's like you die a little bit. And there's really a lot of truth in that, because people don't realize what it means to a football player, when you lose. I mean, it is, you're just crushed, the night after the game. And, we've gone through that year after year after year. And so it was difficult, but if you, again, control your mind and you look at the positives and you try to, negate the negativity that's going on around you, then you look at, the good things. And the good things were the fans, and the other good thing was my teammates. I just adored, the guys that I worked out with. I just, those first years with the names that I mentioned, Kilmer and Doug Atkins and Ernie Wheelwright and, just, the guys, David Witzel. I mean, it was just a pure joy, being with those guys. And then later on with Archie and Danny Abramowitz, and Danny was there in the very beginning, 1967. So it was special, being and that's what you had to do. You had to keep your mind to what is good, what is positive that's going on around me, and not, kind of focus on, the difficult things.
All right, and while we're on the subject of personal accolades, what was it like when the team named you captain?
Well, that's, John, when you said, I've been traded and then came back. In 1968, I had a good year. And then in 1969, and I don't know how it was then, whether it was Coach Spears or the team voted on the captain. I think the team voted on the captain. But I was made captain. And that really, really meant a lot to me. And not only did it mean a lot to me, as a player playing for New Orleans, but it also prepared me for the future. I feel like one of my gifts is my leadership skills, and I really feel like that really was honed and developed in New Orleans. I later on in my business life, those characteristics really came through and really helped me as I developed a new career.
I know the contract with Atlanta and New Orleans, that was a pretty bizarre question. Here's another one for you. How do you end up in a movie with Charlton Heston?
Well, for some reason, nobody had big expectations for us. And I think that was in 1968. I think it was in our second year. I'm not mistaken. And it was, so they utilized our team, and it really was somewhat of a distraction because they were filming it during the season, and so on our days off, we would go down and they'd suit us up in different uniforms, and like some of us would be Saints, and then some of us would be our opponents, and we'd do that on our off days, and then during the game they'd have the actors on the sideline, and they were being filmed with the crowd behind them and stuff like that. So, and I remember Charlton Heston was introduced in one of the games. I think he was wearing number 17, Billy Kilmer's number. If I'm not mistaken, he ran out on the field. But John, what was so unique about it is that, I mean, it was a fun experience for us all. All the football players wanted to be actors, and all the actors wanted to be football players. The actors would be out throwing the ball around, trying to hone their skills, and all of us. I mean, you should have seen the competition to get, so like, for instance, if we were doing a drill out in the field, and they called the team up to a huddle, every one of us was fighting for a camera position. So, it was quite an experience. But I had quite a scene with Charlton Heston. We had a shower scene, and it was kind of a nude scene from the backside. It took about Wow, 3 hours to tape it. Both of us came out and we looked like prunes. It didn't look that long.
So in the first Life of a Saint episode, I spoke with Derlin Moore, and he called you out as one of the most influential guys in his career. The fact that you stayed late after practice to help him work on his technique. At that point, you're a pretty seasoned veteran. Why did you end up putting so much time into Derlin Moore?
Well, first of all, it was very easy to see the talent that Derlin was bringing to our team. And, we desperately needed talent. So it was easy, to spend time with Derlin. And not only was it good for him, but because he was such a good talent, it was good for me. And, just working out against him. And so, there was kind of a selfish aspect to it as well as, wanting to help him, because I think I probably got as much out of it or more than what Derlin was. But, that was just something, that was part of my work ethic. I had just gotten in a habit from a very young age of knowing that you've got to spend extra time. You just can't, put it together, during a practice that you really learn, for instance, after practice, when you can take time to think about what you did and how to do it better. And the other thing is you're really tired at the end of practice, and that's the best time to really work and hone your skills is when you are tired, because during a game, that's the way that you're going to be, in the fourth quarter. And so it's best, to really learn to work hard, when you're tired and develop those muscle memories and things like that you need to play with. Well, I think if you look at any, again, I don't put myself in the category, but you look at, guys like Jerry Rice, Larry Fitzgerald, those are the guys, no matter whether they're in the, second or third year of their career or in the 14th or 15th or 16th year of their career, their work ethic was there all the time. You just don't stop. When you stop working and you stop, giving it that added amount, you're out. And so, I don't know, it's just part of the game. And I wish, most young players would realize that what it takes, the sacrifice that it takes to really become a good football player.
So I know we keep talking about personal accolades. You've got a lot of them. So is there any one thing, because you're on so many all-decade teams and Hall of Fames in the works, is there any one thing that stands out as particularly special to you, or is it all just everything's an honor and just anytime you get to be around it, you're a happy guy?
All of them are very meaningful to me. For a football player, when you're in the midst of a game or of your career, you're just putting so much into the game. You're not really aware of your career. And it really is after you retire, and I'll say this, I know it was in my case, and I think it's in the case of most football players, it took me about 2 years to get over retiring. Mm-hmm. I really was in somewhat of a depressed stage. I developed hypoglycemia, and I just went through a very, very difficult time because you just don't realize how much you love the game and how much it means to you. And so then you leave it. In my case, we moved back to the state of Washington, and I was completely away from football. I was away. I lost my stage that I was on, and I had to develop a new career. But to this day, I still dream about football just about every night. I have some dream where I'm with a team and I'm old. I'm the oldest player. and and they're not paying attention to me. and, and so there's just this loss, of the sport. And I can't tell you how passionate I was about the game. So after, and being separated, up here in Washington, I'm not really connected with football anymore. But when these awards or not recommendations, but where they acknowledge my play, it means so much to me. So I would say I would lump them all together. Not one was more important than the other, but they've just all been a real blessing to me.
So I was actually at that all 50th game, and it was so cool seeing everybody brought back into the stadium, and you see all these different generation players kind of mushed into one Saints all 50 team. Pretty special day.
I missed. I have a grandson that plays professional football. Mm-hmm. I was at his game, and so I wasn't able to attend that celebration. I just hated to miss out on that.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if you saw, my grandson Cooper and I were honorary captains at the New Orleans game last year. Mm-hmm. I was representing the Saints, and he was representing the Rams.
I remember that.
That was really special for us.
So I see you still live in Washington now. What is it about that state that pulled you back after your playing career was over?
Well, it was a tough decision because I was working for a gentleman named Ed Dorvan, and he was the developer of Chateau Estate and Ormond and another country club on the East Bank. And so I had just a really special job, but I always dreamed about becoming a college coach, and so it just so happened that, and I felt like I needed to coach at the high school level for a couple of years to develop my philosophy and what I wanted to do instead of going right into college coaching. And so a position opened up at my old high school, and so I telephoned the superintendent of schools and asked him if they would consider hiring me as their football coach. And they said, absolutely, come on up. So we sold our home. We lived out at Chateau Estate, sold our home, but a week before I left, I got a call from him and said, Jake, I hate to tell you this, but I didn't know it, but the head coach had promised his assistant that if he stayed with him, that he'd make sure that he got the head coaching position when he left. So there I was. But it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me because we had already plans to move to the state of Washington. So we moved up here. I got into business, and I just loved it. I mean, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I just had a wonderful business career here in the state of Washington.
All right, you're father of Craig Kupp, a quarterback in the NFL, grandfather of Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver who's still going crazy in the NFL. What's it like for you? What has it been like for you watching these guys go through the system and accomplish some of the dreams that they had as kids?
Like I told you, when you have a passion for the game and you love it, again, I feel like I was so blessed because, again, my son Craig, was drafted by the New York Giants and was traded to Arizona and then to the Dallas Cowboys. And so being able to be a part of his career, in fact, I acted as his agent, and Terry Humes, who had been, with the Saints, was now with the Giants, and I negotiated Craig's contract with Harry up there. So it was just really special, again, being connected to football through my son Craig. And then when Kupp got into football, again, here we are again. And it's just something, being able to stay connected to the game. My wife and I, we just about traveled to every one of the Rams games. So we just bounce around the country, following Kupp around, and It's just, I can't get any better than that, John.
Hey, listen, we made it. 9 episodes down. I really appreciate all the love that I've been shown throughout this process so far. If you haven't subscribed yet,
how dare you?
If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video. Who dat, everybody? We'll see you on the next one.